You are watching End Zone, sponsored by Brahms.
Welcome to another edition of the End Zone along with Camryn Johnson. I am Colby Daniels. It is a massive college football weekend as we inch closer to college football playoff rankings, and I think across the board conference races are starting to get really muddy, and that just makes college football a ton of fun. Camryn, how are you?
Oh, good. I'm excited for this weekend. I mean, there's a lot of good matchups. I think we're at the point of the season where you're starting to see who might be contenders and pretenders. I know we'll talk about it later, but especially the SEC right now, we're getting to that point where you see who's the real deal and who maybe was overrated.
That's right. Contenders and pretenders, we start to separate all those teams. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But we have to start the show with number 8, Ole Miss at 6-1. Number 13, Oklahoma at 6-1 in Norman. This is going to be a phenomenal matchup. I'm really excited for this game because I think, and we'll get into the individual matchups along the way, but I think this is by far the best opponent Oklahoma has faced to date. I know they lost to Texas, and we can talk about that a little bit later too, but I think from top to bottom, Ole Miss right now looks like the best football team that OU has faced and will be by far their biggest test.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to the Texas, it's kind of like you said, or we were talking about, like Texas, it's one of those games where no matter who's good and who's not, it's always a close game.
Wonky
so
things happen.
You don't know for sure. Right. But yeah, this is a great test for Oklahoma. I think it's a classic instance of, you know, the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, because this is going to be a defense versus offense through and through. But yeah, I'm really excited. This is one of those games where I'm less confident with what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm excited for kickoff. Obviously, the hype started to build around this game and this matchup on Monday when Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin took the podium at his press conference. He did have a lot of really good things to say about Oklahoma, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, but about midway through the press conference, he was asked, like, why do you think they're so good at all these things that you're talking about? Because the Sooners rank, I mean, in the top 5 in basically every statistical category defensively, and this is how Lane Kiffin responded.
It's phenomenal prep. You know, a film study of signals. I mean, that, you know, as I just tell you how it is. I think they do a great job of that. So if you study people really well, you know tendencies, and then you have enough confidence as a coach to go after those, that seems what he does. It seems like, you know, they've got a really good beat on the plays that are coming when they're called, and they do a great job of going and taking those away. When you look at the Auburn game, I mean, I told Hugh after the game watching it, I mean, you might want to switch the signals. Like, it looks like they have the plays. The middle safety's running down to steal slants, which is very abnormal.
You may have just answered my next question, but do you get with that in mind? Do you have to kind of shake everything up from a signal standpoint this week, or do you do that every week anyway?
No, we're going to keep our same signals.
I mean, I guess I was wondering, do you do that every week, or is that something that you have to specifically address because of who you're playing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and competitively, I can't answer that for you.
There you go. Shots fired from Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin, which is not out of the norm. I mean, that's kind of his personality. But if you're Oklahoma, you take that a certain way, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is a compliment. I mean, because you're doing so well that they, like, when you start doing so well, people accuse you of cheating. As long as you're not actually cheating, that's a compliment. But yeah, it's interesting because there is that balance. It's like if you're just paying attention and doing your really extensive homework, it works. So, but yeah.
But it is a compliment, but it's also almost like saying, well, I mean, what they do isn't just based on how good they are, right? Like there is an underhanded kind of slap in the face that is associated with that. Brent Venables in his press conference wasn't asked about the comments specifically, but he was asked what does go into his prep when they get ready to face an opponent like Ole Miss.
Yeah, everything started, with Coach Stoops and Coach Snyder, Coach Levitt, my linebackers coach, just their prep, their detail. We would work on people year round, and I love that. I love the strategy of the game and trying to understand the DNA of people, mentality as much as you do the scheme. I think that's important. And then you study people in their most stressful, pressure-filled, game-on-the-line moments. Those always, from a DNA standpoint, always will show back up. But find out what people really believe in and what they do well. And, defensively, you got to, do your best to try to take those things away and make them, lean on something that maybe they're not quite as good at.
There you go. That was Brent Venables. Similar to the conversation we had Red River Week when you had Sark specifically offensively versus Brent Venables' defense. This is another one of those Lane Kiffin offense versus Brent Venables' defense, which is going to be a ton of fun. So I got to ask you before we take a break and talk about that specific matchup. You mentioned it, contenders and pretenders. Who in the SEC is good? We'll look at the standings here. It's a very tight race, and we're going to start to get separation. But all week long, I've heard about the SEC. There are some teams that maybe are fraudulent despite their records, and some teams may be better than their records indicate.
I think, to me, Alabama has proven the most. They've seemed legit when you look at their competition, who they face. They've really come a long way since that Florida State loss. Georgia's Georgia. I don't think they're the Georgia of the past by any means, but Texas A&M, maybe it's just because historically they've not been that top team in the SEC that I'm like, is that really true? But I mean, we'll see this weekend. This weekend's a good test for them. I mean,
and how many times have they failed in November, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it feels like they have fallen short down the stretch of seasons on multiple occasions. So I'm kind of with you. So we see Ole Miss and Oklahoma right there with one loss. There are a bunch of one-loss teams in this league. This was thrown out earlier in the week. Oklahoma, they're 2 wins over SEC teams. Those teams are a combined 1-9 in SEC play. Auburn is 0-4. South Carolina is 1-4. So how good are those 2 wins? But when you talk about Ole Miss, they're 3-1. That's against 2-2 LSU, 0-4 Kentucky, and 0-3 Arkansas. 2-9 is the SEC record for their 3 SEC wins. So again, sometimes it's like you accumulate a bunch of wins, but are they quality wins? Right. Are they not? But I mean, to the point of the top of the show, this is where I think we start to get separation and start to get maybe some clarity as to what the record ultimately says. Yeah,
I would agree. And I think just especially this time of year, like the games start to mean more anyway. And I feel like Ole Miss in recent years has been a real, maybe not contender, but they're one of the better teams in the SEC. And I think even just that, reputation, that's the word I'm looking for there. Yeah, I feel like this game, it carries a lot of weight because of that. But yeah, I mean, what a wild finish we're in for.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, let's talk about that Brent Venables, Lane Kiffin matchup on the other side. OU's defense versus the Ole Miss offense next here on the End Zone. All right, let's jump into the matchup. Oklahoma versus Ole Miss. The OU defense, which is arguably the best in the country, versus the Ole Miss offense, which is one of the best offenses in the country. In fact, Oklahoma currently ranks number 1 in total defense, number 2 in scoring defense, number 3 in rushing defense, and number 4 in passing defense in all of college football. Now, the Ole Miss offense doesn't have the same high-level statistics across the board, but they are the number 8 total offense in the country. By far the best offense Oklahoma will have played to this point. So a massive step up, I think, in terms of just competition for this Oklahoma defense. But a giant spotlight on this matchup. You're also facing a guy that, in Trinidad Chambliss, who was a Heisman contender before their loss last week. He's dropped down in terms of odds, but Oklahoma's defense has done nothing but terrorize quarterbacks all season long.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a big key is they've done well against mobile quarterbacks, too. I mean, you look at Jackson Arnold, 10 times technically he was sacked, and then against Lenora Sellers. They do a really good job of handling that, and I think that's going to be a key factor in this weekend's game. And, I mean, that defense is just, it's stout. It's hard to think.
That's a correct statement. I think that's true. Oklahoma has the best defensive line in college football. We're now halfway through the season. I think that is absolutely true to this point of the season. That defensive front has been phenomenal. I think head and shoulders above any defensive line in the country. Watching Ole Miss and Georgia last week, there were times that Georgia, I thought, struggled to put some pressure on the quarterback, but in the fourth quarter, they absolutely terrorized the Ole Miss backfield. In fact, Trinidad Chambliss was 1 of 10 passing in the fourth quarter when Georgia really ramped up the pressure. I think the Oklahoma defensive front, this sounds crazy to say, is significantly better than the Georgia defensive front. If I told you that 2 years ago, you would boo me out of the studio. But Oklahoma, I think, if they can contain the run game, is going to have the opportunity to really generate a lot of pressure on Chambliss.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of their strong suits this year, too, is going up against the run game. I mean, what makes their defensive front especially impressive, too, is the depth there. It's just like you rotate one guy in, and the guy behind him is just as sturdy. I mean, it's just been impressive to watch them, and I think if they can get the jump early and get after Chambliss early, I mean, that's going to be a real tone setter.
The one thing that he does well, if he is protected, is I think he is by far the most accurate passer they will have faced. I mean, Jackson Arnold had opportunities for big plays and just wasn't accurate. Throws is something to be concerned about as well. Kewan Lacey is a really physical running back. I think he's third in the country in rushing touchdowns. So they're a, I think, well-balanced offense, but I think it all starts with being able to generate pressure on the quarterback. If he's clean, he can dice you up, but I think Oklahoma has more than enough on the defensive front to ultimately shut him down. All right, let's look at the other side of the matchup on the other side of this break. Is there some Mateer magic for this Oklahoma offense as they return home to Norman against Ole Miss? We'll talk about that next here on the End Zone. All right, welcome back to the show, along with Camryn Johnson. I am Colby Daniels. By the way, stay tuned because we have some MAC football coming up at the end of this segment before we make game picks to wrap up the show. Before the break, I teased Mateer magic. Are we due for some Mateer magic this weekend in Norman? The Oklahoma offense, I mean, I think after a couple weeks to start the season, everybody was really excited. Obviously, you bring in Ben Arbuckle, you bring in John Mateer following the Michigan game. He's the front runner to win the Heisman Trophy. You play some pretty tough defenses early on, and you know, the Mateer injury, things have sort of hit like a point where I think fans are asking, like, what's the next evolution of this offense? The good news is the rushing attack was clearly better last week against South Carolina.
Yeah, it was easily one of their better games this season. I really hope that, I mean, the question is, can they do it again? Because, you know, they had, I forget which game it was earlier this year, where they looked better and then just turned around.
Temple, maybe?
Right, I think it was Temple. So, but yeah, no, it was really good to see them get rolling on the ground. Torrey Blaylock has been really impressive to me this year. It's been really interesting to see the journey of Jaden Ott, though. Like, you talk about preseason hype to, you know, now he's on the bench most of the time. But yeah, no, it's not just a one and done there. But
Blaylock went over 100 yards last week, new career high, 101 yards to be exact. Averaged 5.3 a carry. Xavier Robinson also averaged 5.3 a carry. So overall, the rushing attack was significantly improved. I thought they made it a point to get the run game going last week. They didn't ask John Mateer to do a lot through the air. You know, I don't know how much of that is just like, if we don't have to do it, let's not do it. Let's let him continue to maybe let that hand heal. I don't know. John Mateer is going to have to be a factor if Oklahoma is going to beat Ole Miss. So, you know, I'm very curious to see what the play calling ultimately looks like. I know Georgia had a lot of success with Gunnar Stockton last week against this Ole Miss defense, both through the air and running the football. So I think John Mateer is going to have opportunities to make big plays. I'm also sort of waiting on the explosive plays from this Oklahoma offense to happen at some point. I mean, when you look at the entire country, explosive plays of 40 yards or more, Oklahoma ranks dead last in all of college football. 136 teams, they have 2 40-plus yard plays on the season. Dead last in the country.
That's crazy. Yeah, and it's surprising, too, because this looked like an offense that was fully capable of those. So it's kind of like the defense and their lack of turnovers. It's like they're really good, but they don't have the numbers in the big plays where they need them. But yeah, I think going back to Mateer, this is 100%, this is a test for him because, you know, Texas, you can argue that maybe, I know he says the hand wasn't an issue, but maybe mentally there was something there. Didn't play all that well. Then this past game, whether it was intentional or not, he wasn't used all that much. So this is really going to be okay, are you ready to get back on the horse here and lead us to victory, you know? So we'll see.
We've had a little bit of a passing of the torch as well. I think in the early stages of the season, Jaron Kanik was clearly the favorite target. It's been Isaiah Satania really the last few weeks. for Oklahoma, and I don't know if that's just because of the way the game has worked out, or if he's just performed at a level where the confidence has grown. But he's been fantastic for Oklahoma in the pass game.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch that. I watched him for a couple of years at Arkansas, and he kind of feel like last season it was a little bit quieter, but this season he has really just like grown into this fantastic player. It's fun to watch that dynamic between him and Mateer. And
yeah. I think Kanik is going to have big opportunities, though. Georgia tight ends last week against this Ole Miss defense, 9 total catches, 85 yards, 3 touchdowns. So maybe this is a week for Kanik to get back on track and put out a really big statistical performance. In terms of the quarterback matchup, both of these guys at one point or another have ranked inside the top 3 of the Heisman odds. So looking at the numbers, I mean, pretty comparable across the board. Completion percentage is nearly even. Passing yards, I mean, they're separated by a few yards. Really, the only glaring difference between these two guys so far this season is that John Mateer's thrown 6 interceptions and Chambliss has only thrown 1. So Chambliss is taking care of the football. But outside of that, it's nearly identical numbers.
Yeah, and I think I saw earlier today, actually, that Chambliss is the first quarterback since Eli Manning to throw for at least 250 yards in his first 5 starts.
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, he's an impressive – that accuracy is really what impresses me the most. I mean, that it is a glaring difference when you see 6 interceptions to 1, but, that's going to be a fun battle to watch. Yeah,
by far the best. We would have thought Mateer Arch Manning would have been the best quarterback battle of the season. Surprise, surprise, it's John Mateer and Trinidad Chambliss. All right, before we make our game picks, he's earned 1 more week at least. We'll see as we get into November and MACtion coming up. But MAC correspondent Adam King has 10 seconds of MAC football.
Yeah, mid-season award watch lists are out. A lot of MAC representation, and these could be the guys that transfer to your schools and help your teams out. So let's start with freshman running back Camryn Petaway.
That was 10 seconds of MAC football here on the End Zone. Along with Camryn Johnson, I'm Colby Daniels. Game picks next here on the End Zone.
Time now for the Brahms in the Bag Pick of the Week.
All right, it is a massive weekend of college football. Let's make some game picks. We've got to start in the SEC. Big win as Missouri future Oklahoma opponent heads to Vandy.
Yeah, who would have thought that, you go back a couple years ago, that Vanderbilt is a top 10 team and favored in a matchup, but I think it's for good reason. I'm going with the Commodores on this one.
I might take Vandy on the road. The fact that they're at home in this matchup secures it for me. Give me Vandy minus the 2.5. Sticking in the SEC, maybe the game of the weekend outside of the local matchup, A&M at LSU, Death Valley at night.
This one was a toss-up. I went back and forth on it for so long, but ultimately you just said it there. It's Saturday night in Death Valley. I think that gives the Tigers the advantage in this one. Plus, they bounce. A lot in their favor.
LSU has been massively disappointing this season. I'm not saying their season is over, but what they've done so far versus the level of expectation, massively disappointing. A&M, I think, is the better football team here, but going on the road to Death Valley at night, I'm with you. Give me LSU plus 2.5, the home underdog. All right, as we move on, it's another future Oklahoma opponent, Tennessee at Kentucky.
Yeah, I think poor Kentucky has not had the greatest run here recently. Tennessee looks pretty darn good to me. I feel comfortable in picking the Volunteers to cover this one and win it handily.
So Kentucky at home taking Texas to overtime last week doesn't give you a ton of confidence?
Okay, there is that. But
or maybe that's just Texas not being good.
I was going to say, that's more Texas to me.
I think Oklahoma's still kicking themselves for letting that one get away. Yuck. I'm with you. Give me Vols minus 7.5, setting up a big matchup next week in Knoxville. All right, I don't know if this is the week, but Oklahoma State, another big underdog on the road at Texas Tech.
Boy, they have just done so well at making these games entertaining in the early goings. They've made it especially entertaining from a fan standpoint, but ultimately, I think Texas Tech is better than the last few teams they've played, and I think this one, Texas Tech will take.
The quarterback situation worries me a little bit for Tech on covering, but if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Give me Texas Tech minus 36.5. Once OSU covers one of these big spreads, then maybe I'll swing back to picking them. All right, the game of the week in all of college football, number 8 Ole Miss at number 13 Oklahoma.
This is going to be a fun one. Ultimately, I think that Oklahoma being at home is a big advantage. I think they're gonna get Mateer rolling again. Things are going to work out great. And the Sooners, I think, are going to get this one.
Cut, copy, paste, Oklahoma defense wins it for the Sooners for I think I've said that 4 weeks in a row. Let's just continue the trend. The Oklahoma defense is the difference. All right, along with Camryn Johnson, I'm Colby Daniels. Everybody have a great college football weekend, and we'll see you next week.